Welcome back to Financial Therapy. It's not just about the money. I'm personal financial planner, columnist, and financial therapist Rick Kahler. Research tells us that 90% of all financial decisions are made emotionally, not logically. For nearly 4 decades, I've been helping people make better money decisions. So what makes my financial worldview different from most financial experts? I blend the nuts and bolts of financial advice with the emotions that drive making them. Good money decisions are not just about the money. So let's get started with today's episode. Welcome back to another episode. Last episode, we started talking about couples and money and just talked about some of those dynamics. And I thought that I would continue with part 2 of that. So when you begin to talk about money with your partner, it's really good to remember that 90% or so of all financial decisions are made emotionally. I mean, you hear that over and over again in the introduction of this podcast. So we can get hung up very, very quickly when it becomes a discussion on money. To a degree, the facts go out the window because we can become triggered, especially when we're talking to our partner about the money. So that's why we like to say that money problems are not about the money. And yet we try to argue over the money and over facts, and we get into these arguments where the facts just don't matter anymore, right? And so this is what a couples therapist would call needing to focus on the process over the content. The content is you did this, you said this, here's the money, here's the data, here's the facts from my perspective, right? Because if we were really looking at facts, we wouldn't be having this engagement. So it's how does a couple fight? How does a couple fight? What's the typical pattern of the fight? They typically do this. The other typically responds this way. It typically escalates, and it typically ends with one partner walking away or however it does. Then we forget about it all and we do the dance all over again. So that is a really important thing to realize, that money fights are not about the money. Money fights are about our money scripts, which in IFS we would call our money burdens, our beliefs, and they are those parts of ourselves that really are trying to protect vulnerable and wounded parts of ourselves from keeping our vulnerabilities safe, right? Because usually when we start to drill down with a couple who are having a fight, kind of a standing fight around money, we're going to find that both of them have a good intention for the other. But it's so very hard for the other to see that person's good intention because they're looking at the container that it's wrapped in, the wrapping. And the wrapping is often not very palatable, right? So this is one reason why it can be so helpful to have a mediator. It can be so helpful, whether that mediator is a very skilled financial planner or a very skilled financial therapist, or a therapist that has done their transference work around money and can really help a couple start to sort this out. Because you don't necessarily need a financial therapist to sort out every issue there is around money when it's not about the content. It's about the process, right? So it's don't necessarily feel that if you're having issues with a partner, that you've got to find a financial therapist to work this out, because first of all, there aren't too many. I don't know how many certified financial therapists there are, but they're probably under 30 in the world. A really good therapist can be helpful. So what is getting into the ways of the money are our emotions, our stories, our history, our past. That is what is clashing. I would say this: there is almost always a way to work things out financially. So if you go to a financial planner and you say, here's what we're fighting about, that planner probably can say, oh, well, that's not a big deal. Here's what you need to do. Boom, 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 boom. Or financially, da, 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 da. And oftentimes the financial, what I want to say, the more obvious, correct financial thing to do. And there is often a financial right answer, but it's not necessarily the right answer. So a financial planner can say, well, here, based on what you guys are doing, do this. More times than not, it's going to line up with one of the partner's viewpoint, right? And then it becomes a big club to use on the other partner that is seeing something a little different and has something to be heard about and a very important contribution to this disagreement. So this is why these talks have to be entered into very knowledgeably and with a lot of respect, so they can work their way through this, so they can really see the vulnerabilities of each other, so they can get to a place of feeling safe enough to really listen, to really hear what the other partner is trying to accomplish. And again, they're usually trying to accomplish the same thing, which can be very surprising, but they have different ways of getting there. So it's kind of like in working on your own money issues. We've talked about polarizations, where you have one part that wants to save and another part that wants to spend, right? And they both have a good intention. They're both trying to do something really good for your system. And it's the same way when we have partners, where you have one partner trying to spend and one partner trying to save. And it can be, I want to say pretty simple, that the partner wanting to save is all focused on the future and not wanting the couple to become destitute. So they have a part that is focusing on that, and the spending one is focused on, let's live today, let's enjoy each other, let's enjoy life. Life is uncertain. And wanting connection, right? And so both parts are honorable, both parts are respectable, both parts have good intention. But it's I shouldn't say but, and it's getting to a place of being able to hear each other around that, and then coming up with a plan, a course of action that can take everybody's concerns into being, or into consideration, and maybe even working with some of those parts. I mean, for example, you can have a partner who's scared to death about the future and doesn't want to spend anything right now. And let's say they're worth $10 million. Well, you'd say, I think you're going to be okay. So there could be some work that needs to be done around the fear that partner has. Where did that fear come up from? Well, what's the story behind that, where they are so afraid that they may not be able to receive the facts that 10 million is enough? So obviously it always gets a little complicated. So I really recommend that a couple have periodic money discussions. It would be great not to have to wait until there is a crisis. And usually we wait until there's a crisis, right? Or we sweep things under the rug. This will get better. This will go away. I don't want to have conflict. We ignore it. And I like to contrast this type of relationship to Sesame Street. Remember Sesame Street? And there was the Cookie Monster. And the Cookie Monster, if I remember right, lived in a garbage can and would often try to get out and bang against the lid until it would get out. And I like to think of these festering money scripts, these festering emotions, and these vulnerable parts of us that would like to be seen. They'd like to be heard. They'd like to tell their story. And for a long time, we can sit on that garbage can and keep them locked away. But as they grow, eating cookies, they get stronger and stronger. And at some point in time, in midlife, or whoever knows when it is, they break out, right? And that's usually around the time that the crisis happens. So if we can address those early on, that is great. My wife and I, when we first got married, we would have discussions, meet with a therapist to do checkups on a quarterly basis. More often can be fine, and we also used to meet with our financial planner on a quarterly basis. So maybe that's too often, maybe that's not often enough, but if you have appointments scheduled, and I'm focusing now on financial, to have financial discussions on a regular basis, this really helps because sometimes there's no crisis happening, right? And other times you can start hearing things that are kind of surprising, or you can start addressing these thoughts and feelings before they get to a really, really big place, or there's just been a lot of wounding and a lot of hurt swept under the carpet, and they get to the place that a person is really triggered. So I think it's a great idea to set these meetings. I think that they're best if they're mediated, if there's a third party that can kind of keep things on track. They don't have to be. Maybe if you do money pretty well with your partner, there's not any obvious issues going on. You both feel pretty clean. You feel that you're on the same page. Setting up a time to talk about money and what's going on can make perfect sense without mediation, without a third party. And it goes a long way to have a set time to meet about money, because typically a date night isn't a great time to necessarily get into the estate plan and talk about your stuckness over who do we choose as a guardian for our kids. And one wants their brother and the other one wants a good friend, and the other just, you can't find that agreement. Maybe it's not a big passionate argument over it, but it's not a great thing for date night. And again, this screaming and meowing you hear in the distance is this litter of kittens. My wife raises Balinese, and we don't have a big enough house for all of the litters that are currently in the house. So I am contending with that for the moment. So a maintenance meeting, a maintenance appointment on a regular basis is really, really important. It can just help us not have to contain all of the emotional energy. It can help us regulate our emotions. It can really add a lot of value. And especially if we're There's a lot of emotions involved. This, again, good to have a third party there, because keeping everything bottled up can be totally exhausting. And for any of you that have ever done therapy or done your own emotional work, you know how exhausted you can be after taking a look at locked away emotions or getting in contact with those emotions. It can be as or more exhausting than doing a lot of physical labor. So the payoff of having this type of meeting is just huge, is particularly valuable. And I think, again, that's one reason why having or doing financial planning is so valuable, because there is a time and a place for a couple to talk about money. And I remember when my wife and I contracted with a financial planner. And I don't know if I've talked about this before, but my wife would talk about things that I wouldn't hear on date night that were new to me, and vice versa. She'd hear me say things like, gee, I didn't know that you felt that way. And it can be just incredibly productive to have those types of meetings. So in those meetings, of course, there's a lot of things to talk about. I recently had a question of people that say we're getting married and setting up times like this, and what are some real important things to address with especially younger couples. What can they talk about? Well, one of the biggest things you can talk about, especially with a new relationship, is debt. I think it's the number one surprise of new couples, is that they will fall in love and they will get engaged and they will get married, and they'll never really talk about their feelings about money. And they'll never talk a lot about the specifics necessarily of their money. Some couples will get married and have no clue what the net worth is of the other person. Lots of money scripts around this. Well, if I asked my partner what they're worth, that will seem like maybe I'm money hungry, or I'm going to judge and evaluate them on their net worth, and it's none of my business. And we can take these same feelings into debt, right? Well, I'm not going to disclose my debt, or I'm certainly not going to voluntarily disclose my debt because I feel so much shame about it. And I don't know what the percentage is of people. It's pretty common to get married and discover that your partner has a huge amount of credit card debt. They may have thought this is no big deal. You know, I've always had $50,000 or $100,000 of credit card debt, or whatever that number is. The number is irrelevant. So finding out about each other's financial situation is really important. You're going into a business relationship. Oh, parts just got up over that, right? Rick, how cold that is. No, it's true. When you get married, this is a business relationship that has been formed, a legal relationship that has been formed, where you become responsible in many situations for your partner's debt, where you've got to agree on money decisions. If you want to buy a house, there's got to be agreement, because typically they're going to put together what both of you make. They're going to want you both to sign the mortgage. So it is really important to address the money part. And yet there's parts of us that will say the money part is so unromantic. It feels so crass, right? Well, how did those parts come to believe that? How did those parts come to believe that money isn't important, or that money doesn't belong in a romantic relationship? because the romance is going to turn to reality, right? After the marriage at some point. So it's really important to start talking about these things. If you're going to buy a house, if you don't own a house, it's kind of important to know what the other person makes and what the debts are. Sometimes the other person can have judgments that could stop even qualifying for a house. And one partner may have dreams of having a house and kids, and all of a sudden discovers, wow, there is no way we can buy a house because of their past. So would it make sense to pull a credit report on your partner? Yes, absolutely perfect sense. A financial planner would say should be a requirement of getting married to pull a credit report on each partner and to know what's out there, right? So I know especially those of you that fall into the money avoidant category are probably convulsing on the floor right now, probably just about ready to turn me off. And you have parts of you that are like, oh my Lord, this is hard to hear. And then those of you that are money vigilant are probably applauding and jumping up and down. And yes, this makes sense. So I guess my point is that there is due diligence. There's money talks that are needed before marriage. And to the best investment you could possibly make would be seeing a financial therapist and starting to have these talks. Because, I mean, just the unveiling of your financial self can be incredibly shameful, right? If there was no shame around it, you both would have these money talks, you'd show each other your net worth statement, and, that could be that. But typically it's kind of like maybe disclosing to a partner that you've had an affair or something. That's not an easy conversation. IFIO and intimacy from the inside out, which is a form of IFS therapy for couples, will call those courageous conversations. And this can be a courageous conversation when you are ready to reveal yourself financially to your partner, especially if there's some things there you feel shame about. And you can feel shame about judgments and debt and things like that. You can also feel shame about having a lot of money and not wanting to reveal that to a partner. The person could feel that if I reveal that, they're not going to see me for who I am anymore. They're going to see me for what I have. So there are tons of issues here to look at, especially, I'd say especially once you're engaged, to see. And if there's debt, who's going to pay off that debt? This can cause a lot of issues. If a person discovers debt after they're married and then they start helping that partner pay off the debt, there can be a lot of resentment come up, a lot of issues around that if it's not dealt with cleanly. So obviously, I'm a pretty big fan of preventive financial counseling. And I just would like to submit to you that the worst time to go see a financial therapist or a financial planner is when you're in crisis. And I want to let you know that is the normal time that people go. So if you're in financial crisis, please don't take shame from that to feel shame, well, we should have done this earlier. I can't tell you how many people that have been financial planning clients have felt great shame of why didn't we do this 10 years ago? Or we talked about coming to see you 10 years ago and we didn't. We only have today, and we can only make changes in today. We cannot do anything about the past. So it's better to say, well, let's go now. But if you can avoid staying out of the financial emergency room and do regular checkups with just like you would your doctor with your financial planner or financial therapist, this can be save so much heartache. All right. Well, I hope there's a nugget in this for you. If you have questions, please email me at rick@rickkahler.com, and I'd be happy to, if I have some answers, engage with you or tell you maybe where you can go to find it. Take care, and I look forward to being with you next week. Thanks for joining me, Rick Kahler, for another episode of Financial Therapy. It's not just about the money. This is where I combine the nuts and bolts of financial advice with the emotions that drive making them. Remember, every financial behavior, whether it appears illogical to you or others, makes perfect sense when we understand the underlying beliefs, feelings, and thoughts. Sign up for my weekly blog at financialawakenings.com. I hope you'll join me again for our next episode.